So yeah, thank you again. Vaclav Hasik here with Building Transparency. I'm the program director there, responsible for data quality and methodology development behind both EC3 and TallyLCA. But I also work closely with our software development team on a lot of the new implementations of features that people are requesting. So really spanning all the things. The way that I will go through my slides today is just a basic, level setting and overview of the tools that we have. For anyone that may not be familiar for both of them, although I've seen that most people on the call have used Tally, so that's great. And then I'll go over some of the updates for both of the tools. So with that, Building Transparency, if you're not familiar with us, we are a Washington State-based nonprofit focused on providing carbon and LCA tools to this industry. Again, you probably already know this, but we have two main tools, TallyLCA and EC3. And some of the updates that we're working on specifically around TallyLCA are support for the latest Revit version, and then also an increased or better improved interaction between our EPD database within the EC3 tool. So in TallyLCA, you probably noticed that you can only use it until the Revit 2024. Partially that's because of major change on Autodesk side in terms of support of the code base that TallyLCA was originally written in. With the update to Tally 2.0, we're moving to that newer code base, and we'll support Revit 25 and on from there. So this is just a clarification here. In terms of the interaction between Tally and EC3, you might be familiar with the fact that TallyLCA, or Tally 1.0 essentially, uses its own database of environmental impact data. And there's only one way into EC3, right? With your project data, you can export information from TallyLCA to EC3. And then some of the EPD information may already be automatically mapped. Some of it you can add, but it's sort of a one-way road. With the Tally 2.0 update, we're actually be going to using the EC3 or the environmental impact data that's within the EC3 tool, including product EPDs, industry EPDs, as well as we're working on adding generic data similar to what was in TallyLCA before. So you'll be able to, essentially choose most of the things that are in EC3. There's still some caveats with some of the availability and synchronization of the environmental impact categories between, EPDs and what you need to do for whole building lifecycle assessment. But what it will allow us to do is also support both, North American assessments, as well as in the future some other regional assessments, especially in Europe, where the life cycle and environmental impact categories might not be using Tracy categories, but might be using the EN 15804 standard. I'll get into that a little bit more later on as well. But essentially, the core of this slide was that there's going to be an increased communication between those two tools and databases. Now, in terms of the level setting, again, if you're not familiar with both tools, TallyLCA is still focused on the design stages when you do have some detailed information about the design. So it's not really as focused on the planning stages and conceptual design like the Epic tool would be. It's a little bit down the road in the design phases. And then EC3 still is essentially focused on the most accurate as-built information for your project, including the most specific environmental product declaration data. A lot of these slides are, you're probably familiar with if you've been on any TallyLCA or EC3 webinars with me before. So again, TallyLCA focuses on a whole building lifecycle, including all lifecycle stages, and that's going to be the case in the 2.0 version as well. We're just switching to some different data sources for especially the end of life stage and even the operational energy use stages, as well as construction and installation energy use. And as mentioned, for A1 to A3, it's going to be very heavily using the EC3 data. So TallyLCA, again, mostly focused on design. EC3, we have the environmental product database, which will also in the future include generic data estimates, as I mentioned. That is already built in. It's not yet rolled out publicly, but it will be coming later this year. It will be necessary for the use of TallyLCA as well. And then, of course, within EC3, you still do have that plan and compare buildings feature where you could set up your own projects, free of charge, and connect your environmental product declaration data with material quantities that's still available in the same form in EC3. In terms of updates for each of these tools, I think this is what most people here are probably waiting for. So I'll start with EC3. And you probably have noticed there haven't been too many user-facing updates or changes over the past few months. We've been making a lot of updates in the background, especially on some of our data extraction processes from EPDs, so that we can fill in some of the additional environmental impact categories that will also be then used in tools like TallyLCA. So that's one of the things. We're also working on some core user interface updates, specifically trying to improve it so that we are Section 508 compliant. This is required for a lot of government projects or government entities that are trying to use the tools. So that's what we're focusing on first. And then long term, we're also considering some major changes into how we actually display some of the data. The advanced UI UX processes are more in the planning stage currently, but they include enhanced transparency and how the category statistics are actually being calculated, and more clearly showing how the product EPDs, industry EPDs, and now the new set of data that will be available, how they actually contribute to those category statistics. Alongside of that, we also get a lot of questions around the uncertainty values in EC3, and so we also want to make sure that that's a little bit more transparent in any way that we can make that more transparent. Obviously, that helps the use cases. There's actually a new feature, I think, in the find and compare materials section. You should be able to actually reveal additional column in that table of environmental product declarations that shows you the reported GWP values right alongside the uncertainty adjusted values. So those are, that's just one way of making sure that the tool is a little bit more transparent. We're also planning to address biogenic carbon in a slightly better way. So right now, I don't know if anyone has noticed, but we do try and track stored biogenic carbon on any of the EPD data points, but it's not really used anywhere else throughout the tool. It really only lives within the individual EPD page currently. And so in the future, the idea is that we will actually show some of the biogenic carbon storage on the project pages, and also align, there are a few categories where the consistency and ability to actually extract the stored biogenic carbon has been challenging, but going forward with the changes in the ISO and EN standards, should be more consistent throughout EC3 as well. And then finally, the main thing that we're also considering is all of the different use cases of EC3 that people are using it for, and really streamlining some of the entire workflows of how people get to answer their own questions for these different use cases more more efficiently. The tool was very simple to use, I think, at its launch, but over the years it has really tagged on a lot of additional features that can be hidden in certain cases, and so we just want to make it a little bit easier to use again. I skipped this one point on the category updates. So we normally try and roll out new category updates and release new categories publicly every quarter. Again, because of our major changes on the background of EC3 over the past few months, we haven't made many of the category updates, but there are some coming specifically for CMU and masonry grout. If you are more interested in some of the additional information behind the development of EC3 categories and adding more material data, I will put this plug in for a webinar next week that my colleague Michaela DeRusso is being part of. So if you want to learn more about the EC3 category process and how those categories get developed, I recommend going to this webinar as well. I'll share the link later. Now let's move on to TallyLCA updates. So for TallyLCA or Tally 1.0, we have rolled out some patches to some of the A1 to A3 data in the tool. As you know, there were some outdated industry-wide EPDs for some time in the tool, and so we have updated some of the main structural material EPDs, including wood, steel, cement, and then XPS insulation was a major one as well, even though it's not structural. So I think we addressed some of the main concerns that people were having. Obviously, we could make some additional updates. Just the process to editing the data in the current TallyLCA is kind of cumbersome, so it's actually not very easy for us to do. That is all going to be changing with Tally 2.0, just because we're changing the whole pipeline of how data actually gets into the tool. And so I'll switch right into Tally 2.0. This tool is currently in the development stage. We are on track to start testing in March so far. We have all of the user interface pretty much set up. We're just finalizing some of the data updates. That's kind of what is holding up the beta testing right now. Overall, it should be released in mid 2025, so probably June, July. That's what we're still targeting today. Some of the few major changes are listed here, but I'll actually go through some of the screenshots of the tool just so you can see it, actually what it looks like in the new user interface, what some of those changes will be. And finally, on this page, it will be, as I mentioned before, it will be available for Revit 2016 and on, so including Revit 2025 and all of the upcoming Revit versions. So now specific examples of the tool, and apologies for the low quality of these screenshots. Unfortunately, I can't show you the tool live because it's still only in local development environment where we can run it right now. So I have a couple of screenshots to show you. We are sticking with the familiar user interface because we heard from users that everyone really likes that part of the tool, that it's super simple to use. So most of the outlines of where things are in the tool and what they look like will be very similar. The one major change is going to be that all of this is actually going to be running essentially a browser version of the user interface, but it's still going to be within a Revit window. And we've tested it, quite a bit. It's really snappy, just like the tool was before. We've actually improved the loading time of all of the dimensional information of the project elements themselves. So, if you were waiting for very large projects in TallyLCA for 20, 30 seconds, in Tally 2.0, that actually takes only a couple of seconds, even on those large projects. That's one of the major improvements here, just by switching to the new code base. On the data side, we are actually disaggregating a lot of the post A1 to A3 stages. And so I'll start here on the left side. So you can see that we are disaggregating a lot of different transport data points that link to each other. So for example, linking material categories to different modes of transports and the mode of transport, environmental impact information per, let's say, 10 kilometer. Also, the scenario probabilities are going to be geographically specific. So we'll be able to actually modify a percentage of, truck transportation in the North American region has different values than, for example, in the European region. We're doing the same for end-of-life categories, so actually disaggregating the environmental impacts from, the environmental impacts for each scenario to what scenarios are available for different material categories, and then what the probabilities of those end-of-life scenarios for each category actually are. And a lot of those probabilities will actually be modifiable by the end user as well. So the main difference is that in the current version of Tally, the transportation, most of the transportation and all of the end of life scenarios are actually predefined and hard-coded essentially to each of the materials. And with this disaggregation, it will be much more flexible and you'll be able to run different types of analyses, even on the other life cycle stages. It's, you can't probably see any of the text in the diagram here on the right side, but the main point is that any of those boxes in the yellow are what's in the current version of TallyLCA. That's kind of the core structure of how the data it relates to each other. What we're adding is right above it in that outline, mostly the purple and orange boxes. So you're seeing that we're adding a lot of additional logic into the tool to be able to do this. That's really exciting. Again, apologies for the low quality of the screenshot, but hopefully you can see it. As I mentioned, we will be collecting environmental impact results for both the EN 15804 environmental impact categories as well as Tracy. And another addition that you can see here is that we're also collecting not just the average values, but also any of the low or high estimates as well. Some of it is going to be using the uncertainty values from EC3. And for the generic dataset, we're actually working with the data development team to come up with the low and high values specific to different scenarios, representative of the regions where the data is applicable. So that's those are some of the exciting changes on the material impact information side. In terms of results, so we're actually going to have in-tool interactive results where you will be able to mouse over certain things and see what the values are. With old PDF reports, it was very hard to see the differences in some of the colors when you are looking at a whole long list of different material types. It's going to be much easier to use in the new Tally. And you won't actually have to generate a whole report. You will be able to see the results right as you're modeling things in Tally. Likewise, with the tables that were in Excel before, they will also be available within the tool itself, and you'll be able to use different changes to the grouping of the results as well as filtering, etc. There will still be export options, and so you'll be able to export the data in CSV, in JSON format, and in other formats as well. So we're really trying to make this as flexible as possible. We understand there's different end use cases for these functionalities. In terms of functionalities of the tool, so if you've used it before, which most people here have, you're familiar probably with the full building study, you're familiar with the design option comparison, and with the define template file. The additional feature that we're going to be adding in terms of the object of the study is this full building comparison. And so in the current design option comparison, you can only see the results for those specific design options. So let's say you were just looking at different options for your roof system, right? You would only see the scope of the materials within that roof system when you were doing design option comparison analysis. With the full building comparison, you can define our design options, but actually still put or view the results in the context of the entire building as well, including those changes in the design options. And so you can see then that, for example, in this case, it looks like when looking just the, let's say, roof system, you would have 30% reduction, right, within the roof system itself. If you put it in the context of an entire building, that's about a 10% reduction. So you can see those, you will be able to see those differences easier and don't have to post-process the data. There's also going to be individual material substitution feature so that you don't have to actually create design options when you want to substitute, let's say, EPS for XPS insulation within the model. So I don't have a screenshot of that feature. That is still being worked on these next couple of weeks, but that is also coming in Tally 2.0. Another interesting results feature is going to be comparisons to, on adaptive reuse projects, comparisons between existing building and an adaptive reuse building, where maybe you may be retaining some of the elements on your project. Previously, what you would have to do is you would have to export two sets of results, right? And then do some post-processing in Excel, for example, to do the comparison yourself. In the new tool, you will actually be able to see in the results section the comparison of any of the existing phases with the new phases and those results, to just comparing to any sort of new um, elements that are actually placed on new phases within the Revit model. And so again, this will just streamline the potential use case of using the tool in an adaptive reuse project. Additional, I think just minor updates to the tool include some streamlining of how you can actually interact with the modifications or material definitions within each of the elements. So for example, copying definitions, you will be able to do with a simple Control-C, Control-V operation. You won't have to do the slightly cumbersome way of copying definitions as you have to do in Tally 1.0. So it's a small update, but hopefully makes things faster. And also we heard about, some of the difficulties that people have with the building elements set of analysis in the current version of TallyLCA, which is tied to the assembly code field within the Revit elements. And it's not super clear in the current version. So what we're doing in Tally 2.0 is actually allowing people to assign the system type directly within the Tally plugin itself. So you won't have to go and modify the assembly code in Revit. Again, so that will streamline a couple of things for folks. I think those are the main updates that I have. And yeah, we're just super excited to be working on this and can't wait to be able to share it with everyone.